The very thing that makes you irreplaceable is the same thing that makes you quietly disposable. You give until you're translucent, and the world just takes. Without even noticing you're disappearing. What if I told you that your exhaustion isn't weakness? It's awakening. You've been here before. Sitting in the dark at 2 a.m. wondering how someone who feels everything so deeply can feel so empty. The notifications are piling up. People need you. They always need you. But tonight you can't even summon the energy to care. This isn't burnout. This isn't depression. This is your soul staging an intervention. And if you're an INFJ empath, this moment, this breaking point, isn't your enemy. It's your invitation. Welcome to your dark night of the soul. Let me paint you a picture. Sarah sits in her therapist's office describing what sounds like a perfect life. Successful career, close friendships, always the one people turn to in crisis. But her hands are shaking as she speaks. "I don't understand," she whispers. "Everyone thinks I have it together, but I feel like I'm dying inside." Sarah is living what Carl Jung called the tyranny of the persona, the mask we wear to survive in the world. But for INFJ empaths, this mask doesn't just hide who we are, it slowly suffocates who we're meant to become. You call it empathy. But maybe it's just the way you disappear. Here's what no one tells you about being an INFJ empath. Your gift isn't just feeling what others feel, it's absorbing what they can't handle themselves. You become an emotional dumping ground and you call it love. Jung understood this pattern. He wrote about how we project our unlived lives onto others, but he also recognized something deeper. How sensitive souls often become containers for the collective shadow, the parts of humanity that others refuse to face. You carry them. Think about your last conversation with someone in pain. Did you listen, or did you absorb? Did you help? Or did you become their emotional storage unit? There's a difference, and your nervous system knows it. The INFJ dark night isn't triggered by dramatic external events. It's triggered by the slow realization that you've been performing empathy instead of living authentically. You've been so busy being what others need that you've forgotten who you actually are. Maria found herself crying in the grocery store last Tuesday. No reason, just overwhelmed by the fluorescent lights, the crowd, the constant hum of other people's energy. She's been an emotional sponge for so long she doesn't know where others end, and she begins. This is what Jung called participation mystique, the unconscious fusion with others that dissolves individual identity. For INFJs, it feels like compassion, but it's actually a form of emotional self-abandonment. Here's the contradiction that will shift everything. The moment you think you're helping everyone, you're actually helping no one, not even yourself. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow isn't just about our dark impulses. For INFJ empaths, the shadow is often our unlived life. The dreams we sacrificed, the boundaries we never set, the anger we never expressed. Because good people don't get angry. Your shadow isn't your enemy. It's your unrealized potential locked away because you learned early that your needs didn't matter as much as everyone else's comfort. But here's what happens when you ignore your shadow for too long. It doesn't disappear. It grows stronger. And eventually it stages a coup. That's what your dark night really is. Your authentic self refusing to be silenced any longer. The question isn't whether you'll face your shadow. The question is whether you'll do it consciously or whether it will drag you there kicking and screaming. David had been everyone's unofficial therapist since he was 12 years old. Not professionally, just naturally. Something about his energy invited confession. People spilled their secrets to him at bus stops. Strangers unloaded their deepest trauma in coffee shop lines. Co-workers cornered him in break rooms to process their relationship drama. He wore this role like a badge of honor, believing it made him special, necessary, loved, until the day he realized he had no idea what his own feelings even felt like anymore. That's when a friend introduced him to Carl Jung's shadow work. And everything, every relationship, every pattern, every exhausted moment, suddenly clicked into devastating focus. I wasn't helping people, he told me months later, his voice quiet with revelation. I was avoiding myself. Every time I absorbed someone else's pain, every time I became their emotional container, I didn't have to face my own unprocessed grief, my own unmet needs, my own terrifying loneliness. I was using their crises as a drug to avoid my own healing. Carl Jung identified several specific patterns that show up in sensitive intuitive types during their dark night. These aren't character flaws. They're unconscious survival strategies that once served you, but now imprison you. See if any of these feel uncomfortably familiar. The savior complex. You don't just want to help people. You need to be needed. It's not kindness anymore. It's how you derive worth-meaning identity. When people stop requiring your emotional labor, when they solve their own problems without consulting you, you feel invisible, worthless, forgotten. Your self-esteem is entirely dependent on other people's dysfunction. Emotional hoarding. You collect other people's problems like vintage books, with the noble intention of processing them later, of somehow transmuting their pain into wisdom. But later never comes. Your inner world becomes a storage unit of unresolved feelings that aren't even yours. Traumas you never experienced, anxiety that belongs to people you haven't spoken to in years. The invisible martyr. You give and give and give, then feel resentful when that generosity isn't reciprocated. But here's the devastating kicker. You never actually asked for what you needed. You just expected others to read your mind the way you instinctively read theirs. You became bitter about neglect you never communicated you were experiencing. Emotional fusion. You've lost the ability to distinguish between empathy and absorption. When your mother is anxious, you become anxious. When your partner is depressed, you sink into depression. When your friend is angry, rage consumes you. You think this makes you compassionate, but it actually makes you unavailable for genuine intimacy. Every time you stay silent about your needs, you teach people that you're fine being unseen. Every time you absorb someone else's emotions as your responsibility, you teach yourself that your own inner world doesn't matter. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But for INFJ empaths, the path to authenticity runs directly through the shadow. You cannot become whole while rejecting the parts of yourself that seem inconvenient or unacceptable. Your dark night is actually an initiation, as sacred and necessary as any ancient ritual. It's your psyche saying, "We've tried the people-pleasing route for decades. We've tried the self-sacrifice strategy. We've tried earning love through emotional labor. Now we're going to try something radical, honoring who you actually are." This process Jung called individuation, the lifelong journey of integrating conscious and unconscious aspects of the personality into a coherent, authentic whole. But it requires something most INFJs struggle with profoundly: selfishness, not the destructive narcissistic kind that tramples others, the sacred kind that says, "My needs matter too. My dreams matter too. My emotional reality matters too." Jung understood that this integration cannot happen through willpower or positive thinking. It requires what he called holding the tension of the opposites, accepting that you can be both compassionate and boundaried, both loving and unavailable, both wise and still learning. Here's what I've learned from working with hundreds of INFJ empaths over the years. What most therapists never tell you, you don't actually feel other people's emotions. You feel your own emotional response to their emotional state. The anxiety you think belongs to your chronically worried friend. It's your anxiety about their anxiety. The sadness you carry from your mother's childhood trauma. It's your sadness about not being able to fix her past. This distinction changes everything. Because once you realize you're feeling your own feelings about their feelings, you can start to choose differently. You can feel compassion for their struggle without becoming consumed by it. You can offer support without becoming responsible for their healing. Rachel discovered this truth during what should have been a routine phone call with her chronically dramatic sister. For 37 years, these conversations had followed the same script. Sister would dump some crisis into Rachel's lap. Rachel would absorb the chaos and spend the next week trying to solve problems she had no power to solve, losing sleep and peace of mind in the process. But this particular Tuesday was different. Instead of immediately absorbing the emergency energy, Rachel found herself stepping back, observing her own internal response. I'm feeling anxious, she realized, because I want to fix this situation, and I know I can't. I'm feeling frustrated because I want my sister to make different choices, and I know she won't. That one moment of clarity, that single instant of conscious recognition, shifted 20 years of unconscious emotional fusion. She could still love her sister deeply. She could still offer support and encouragement. She just stopped becoming her sister's emotional twin. It was like waking up from a dream I didn't know I was having, Rachel told me later. I could finally love her without losing myself. Jung called this the transcendent function, the mysterious process by which opposing forces within the psyche find a new way of being together. For INFJs, it's the moment when empathy evolves from unconscious absorption to conscious compassion. You learn to feel with people instead of for them. You learn to hold space for someone's pain without becoming responsible for their healing. You learn the profound difference between emotional intimacy and emotional enmeshment. This isn't about becoming cold, closed off, or uncaring. It's about becoming clear about where you end and others begin, clear about what's actually yours to carry and what belongs to someone else's journey, clear about the difference between love and codependence. Anthony describes this shift beautifully. I used to think that caring meant carrying, that love meant becoming responsible for everyone else's emotional well-being. But I learned that real love, sustainable love, means staying present in my own body while witnessing someone else's experience. It means offering my authentic self, not my performing self. The most beautiful thing about the INFJ dark night, it doesn't destroy your empathy or make you selfish. It refines your compassion into something sustainable, something genuine, something that actually serves both you and the world. There's a moment in every INFJ's dark night when something fundamental shifts. It's usually subtle, easy to miss if you're not paying attention. Like the first time you say no to a request without immediately offering a lengthy explanation or alternative solution. Or the first time you feel someone's emotional chaos swirling around you and think, that's theirs to figure out, not mine to fix. For Alex, The turning point happened during what should have been a typical family dinner. His mother, following her usual script, launched into an exhausting litany of complaints about his father's shortcomings, his brother's poor choices, his sister's financial irresponsibility. For 32 years, Alex had been the family's emotional processor, absorbing everyone's dysfunction, carrying their unresolved conflicts home in his nervous system, losing sleep, trying to solve problems that predated his birth. But this Sunday evening was different. As his mother's familiar energy of complaint and victimhood filled the dining room, Alex felt something he'd never experienced before: detachment. Not cold indifference, but conscious non-participation. He could see her pain, could feel compassion for her struggle, but he didn't become infected by her emotional state. He listened with presence, but he didn't become her therapist. He offered empathy, but he didn't absorb her frustration as his personal responsibility. For the first time in 3 decades, he remained himself while being present for someone else's experience. "It felt like I was breathing for the first time," he told me weeks later. "Like I'd been holding my breath my entire life, trying to manage everyone else's emotional weather. Suddenly, I could love them without disappearing into their stuff." Carl Jung understood that healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about remembering what was whole to begin with. Your dark night strips away everything that isn't essentially you. All the roles you played to earn love, all the expectations you carried to feel worthy, all the ways you contorted yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed for your authentic self. What remains when everything false falls away is raw, tender, and absolutely authentic. It's your core self before you learned that your needs were inconvenient, before you believed that your sensitivity was too much, before you decided that everyone else's comfort mattered more than your own truth. The INFJ Empath, emerging from their dark night, looks different, moves differently, speaks differently. They've developed what Jung called psychological sovereignty, the ability to remain centered in their own experience while engaging with others. They speak with quiet authority. They set boundaries without guilt or extensive justification. They offer presence without becoming absent from themselves. Lisa describes this transformation. "I used to exhaust myself trying to be everything to everyone. Now, I show up as myself and let people decide if that works for them. I lost some relationships in the process, but the ones that remained became infinitely more genuine." This is the extended emotional high point, the moment of deepest recognition. You realize that all those years of people-pleasing, all those decades of emotional self-abandonment weren't actually love. They were fear. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of being seen as selfish or inadequate. But here's what Jung knew with absolute certainty. Until you're willing to disappoint others, you cannot truly serve them. Because service that comes from fear is manipulation. It's an unconscious transaction. I'll meet your needs so you'll meet mine. But service that flows from wholeness, from choice, rather than compulsion, from love rather than neediness, that's genuine gift. That's what the world actually needs from you. Carl Jung's shadow work isn't about eliminating the parts of yourself you don't like or think are unspiritual. It's about integrating them consciously, owning them as part of your human wholeness. For INFJ empaths, this means accepting that you have needs that matter, that you experience anger and frustration, that you're allowed to be unavailable sometimes without feeling guilty. It means understanding that your sensitivity is both a profound gift and a serious responsibility, to yourself first, then to others. You cannot pour from an empty cup, cannot offer genuine presence when you're scattered across everyone else's emotional landscape. cannot love others sustainably until you learn to love yourself enough to stay present in your own experience. This integration phase requires immense self-compassion. You're essentially reparenting yourself, learning to provide the emotional safety and validation you've been seeking from others. You're teaching yourself that you matter, that your feelings are valid, that your boundaries are necessary. The turning point isn't a destination you arrive at once and never have to visit again. It's a choice you make repeatedly, sometimes moment by moment, to remain conscious instead of reactive present, instead of absorbed compassionate toward yourself as well as others. There's a Zen saying, "You are perfect as you are, and you could use a little improvement." The INFJ returning from their dark night embodies this paradox. You're no longer trying to become someone else's version of good. You're learning to be humanly whole. This means accepting that you'll sometimes be misunderstood, that some people will mistake your boundaries for coldness, that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Emma used to pride herself on being available 24/7 for anyone in crisis. After her dark night, she learned to say, "I care about you, and I'm not available right now." The sky didn't fall, her relationships didn't end. In fact, they became more honest. The INFJ who has integrated their Carl Jung shadow work doesn't stop being empathic. They become empathic in a sustainable way. They feel deeply without drowning. They care profoundly without carrying. You learn to trust your intuition about people's energy without feeling responsible for managing it. You learn to offer wisdom without needing to be right. You learn to love without needing to be loved, back in a specific way. This is what Jung called the individuated person, someone who has integrated their conscious and unconscious aspects into a coherent, authentic whole. Your dark night wasn't punishment. It was preparation. It prepared you to serve from overflow instead of depletion, to love from strength instead of need, to empathize from wholeness instead of wound. The world needs INFJ empaths who have done their shadow work, because you become living proof that sensitivity and strength aren't opposites. They're dance partners. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But here's what he also knew with absolute certainty. It's the most liberating thing too, the most necessary thing, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and everyone you'll ever encounter. Your INFJ dark night wasn't your breakdown. It was your breakthrough into authenticity, into sustainable empathy, into the radical courage to be disliked by some so you can be genuinely loved by others, into the understanding that you were never meant to be everything to everyone, just yourself to the people who matter. The moment you stop performing empathy is the moment you start receiving it. If this resonated with something true and tender in you, take a moment right now to breathe, to feel what it might be like to come home to yourself after years of living in other people's emotional houses, to imagine what your life might look like if you showed up as yourself instead of as who you think others need you to be. And if you're ready to explore your own Carl Jung shadow work, if you're ready to transform your empathy from burden to gift, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. What part of this journey feels familiar? What are you ready to release? What are you ready to reclaim?